Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to take a few moments and allow people time to join us. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Okay, we are officially going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Stay at Home Speaker Series. Today's program is Effects of Bush Encroachment on Birds in a Southern African Savanna with Muzi Sibiya, Hawk Mountain Autumn 2018 Conservation Science Trainee and doctorate student at the University of Florida. Welcome, Muzi.
Thank you, Jamie. Nice to be here.
Oh, I'm so happy to be working with you again after all these years. Yay. And thank you to everyone who is joining us today. We are so glad that you're here with us. My name is Jamie Dawson, and I am the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. As you may know, Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. To all of our members, thank you so much for your continued support. And if you're joining us tonight and you're not a member, we hope that you consider becoming one in the future. Hawk Mountain hopes that everyone remains safe and healthy during this fall season, and we are thrilled to be able to offer our local and global community a variety of free virtual programming. As always, Hawk Mountain greatly appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on Hawk Mountain's YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website directly connecting you to our YouTube channel. At any point during today's program, viewers may submit their questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. We designated time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we are so excited that Muzi is joining us today all the way from sunny Florida to share with us some of his fascinating doctorate research from the Africa in the field. But before we get started, I'd like to share some of Muzi's background experience with our audience. Muzi is currently a doctoral student in the School of Natural Resources and Environment at the University of Florida. His doctoral program focus is on wildlife ecology and conservation, with a specialization in understanding the effects of shrub encroachment on bird diversity and behavior. Muzi is from Eswatini, an absolute kingdom in Southern Africa, where he has been doing fieldwork for his doctoral studies. Muzi attended Evelyn Baring High School, one of the best high schools in the country. Muzi also served as a conservation science trainee at Hawk Mountain in autumn of 2018. He enjoys traveling and connecting with new people and sharing stories. One of Muzi's goals is to help advance nature conservation efforts in Southern Africa and the world in general by conducting research that aims to understand contemporary factors driving biodiversity. Muzi, it is so nice to connect with you virtually. And I want to ask you, what inspired you to pursue a Ph.D. in the field of wildlife ecology and conservation?
Thank you, Jamie. I think when I was introduced to the field of biology, specifically field biology, during my third year of undergrad at the University of Eswatini, I realized how much I enjoyed the process of research. And I like the fact that I could contribute to generation of knowledge to enhance conservation. Also, I realized that there's a shortage of experts in the wildlife field, and that wildlife biologists are urgently needed to alter conservation policy through research and enhance conservation in Africa in general. So, but finally, I often wondered why I only started hearing about wildlife conservation in my third year at college. Question is, can we expose students earlier on and see if that won't make a difference in changing people's perspectives towards nature conservation? Well, if one hopes to one day overhaul the education system, they better be prepared. So that's me preparing to overhaul the education system in
I
Eswatini.
love it. I love your motivation and your inspiration. So what made you decide to really hone in and focus on birds for your doctoral research?
My final year undergrad project was on assessment of tree recruitment and disturbance in our savannas. I did not enjoy that project very much. I hope my Eswatini advisor won't hear this. But soon after graduating, I was hired as an assistant coordinator for the Savanna Research Center in Eswatini. My job was to conduct fieldwork for a monitoring program that was run by the University of Florida in collaboration with the University of Eswatini and All Out Africa, a nonprofit NGO in Eswatini, as well as assist visiting researchers with their research. So for a year, I was involved in sampling vegetation, trapping small mammals, conducting camera trap studies, monitoring bats, and conducting bird surveys across the savanna. So soon I realized that I enjoyed birding more than anything, but I wasn't very good at bird ID. So I put in extra effort to improve. And by the end of the year, I was super excited by how much I've learned and wanted to continue working towards understanding bird environmental impacts.
Awesome. So you're from Eswatini, which for the audience was formerly Swaziland. How did you first hear about Hawk Mountain Sanctuary in Pennsylvania, in Kempton, Pennsylvania?
Well, I heard about the opportunity to become a trainee at Hawk Mountain from my undergrad and grad supervisor, Professor Aramonajam. Some of you might know him. He had a student who had gone through a similar training at Hawk Mountain before, and this student had gone on to be a PhD student at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. So Professor Monajam knew that I would be interested because I had been involved in a number of projects aimed at understanding raptor conservation issues, and I was involved in vulture population monitoring in Eswatini as well. So that's how I connected.
Awesome, thank you. So how did your experience during your traineeship at Hawk Mountain, how does that experience help you now with your current work?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot I can say about this, but one of the things that I think Hawk Mountain helped me with really, I mean, since trainees are given stipends to buy their own food, even though everyone is always, giving us free food. I gained a ton of experience just understanding the value of the dollar. If you're used to buying a bread, $11, and you get to the US, bread is like $3. You're like, whoa, so cheap. But so that experience of using, the money, also navigating fresh produce markets, grocery shops, and generally picking my own everyday meal in the US. So I think being at Hawk Mountain boosted my confidence, and that helped me transition quickly into the Gainesville community when I started my studies. So
wonderful. Well, thank you so much. Well, I think everyone's really excited to hear your presentation. So Muzi, I am going to turn it over to you.
Okay. And my screen. Can you see that, Jamie? Is that
Yes, it looks perfect.
Okay, so thank you everyone for attending this seminar, this webinar. As Jamie mentioned, I'm Muzi. I'm a grad student at the University of Florida, but originally from Eswatini. And today's talk is on the effects of bush encroachment on the savanna bird community. Okay. First, I wanted to give you a brief background of my current work. So my work focuses on trying to understand two key factors driving biodiversity in the savanna ecosystem. Savannas are widespread across the world, but my focus is on the African continent, where bush encroachment is predicted to intensify. On the other hand, scientists are concerned about the ongoing global large herbivore extinctions, and there are indications that removal of large herbivores would promote bush encroachment in African savannas. So therefore, there's an urgent need to understand the influence of these two drivers on savanna communities to help predict changes and therefore formulate mitigation measures that promote conservation. So a little bit on this large herbivore work I'm focusing on. So large herbivore effects are varied and are hard to predict because the savanna hosts a diverse community of large herbivores. However, elephants that are considered ecosystem engineers are predicted to have the greatest influence on savanna vegetation because they remove large trees and open canopies with consequences for other communities. Scientists have reached various conclusions regarding the influence of large herbivores on savanna structure and biodiversity. And one way to improve our understanding of their effects is through experimental manipulations. Here we set up treatment plots that exclude all large herbivores. This is the picture labeled full on the slide. We also have treatments that only exclude elephants, so labeled partial on the picture. The partial treatments help us isolate elephant effects. We are monitoring changes in bird communities in relation to vegetation structure and insect abundance as key food resources for birds. But today we're focusing on this problem of bush encroachment. Bush encroachment has several definitions, but in general, it is the unprecedented increase in wood vegetation dominated by shrub species. Bush encroachment is not just an African problem, but this phenomenon is occurring across open ecosystems of the world, such as grasslands and savannas. Scientists believe that a global driver, such as increasing atmospheric carbon, is responsible for bush encroachment. In North America, it is occurring across prairies with huge repercussions for ranch quality and cost American livestock farmers a fortune to control every year. However, sub-Saharan Africa bears the brunt of bush encroachment as conservation remains under budgeted and there's still a strong reliance on natural resources. Shown on the map is shrub encroachment regimes across the continent of Africa. And as you can see, indicated by the blue circles, bush cover is increasing annually across many parts of Africa and Southern Africa in particular. Scientists that study ecosystem changes in relation to changes in wildlife communities often talk about a heterogeneous ecosystem or a complex ecosystem. So if we're thinking about this in terms of vegetation structure, so in general, we know that a complex vegetation structure is predicted to increase variation in biodiversity. But bush encroachment is driving homogeneous ecosystems and likely reducing variation in wildlife communities and driving biodiversity down. What we know so far is that bush encroachment reduces species richness, that is the number of species in a given area. But since species possess different traits, for example, we could group species by diet and categorize communities into insectivores, granivores, nectarivores, frugivores, and so on. Or we can group them by nesting substrate and categorize them as cavity nesters, grass, shrub, or tree nesters. What's important here is that a reduction in species richness results to a decline in community traits. This has a negative consequence on ecological services. For example, if the decline is driven by loss of insectivores, the result could be increase in pest insect abundance in the system. However, there is a gap in our knowledge of bush encroachment wildlife outcomes because most of the studies focus on spatial effect, and we know little about temporal effect of bush encroachment. One of the ways to improve our understanding is to estimate processes that drive community changes, such as extinction and colonization rate. This is important because bush cover dynamics are unpredictable. One compelling effect of bush encroachment is alteration of community behavior. Studies that investigate rodent communities and large herbivores have shown that animals are changing their behavior in response to increase in woody vegetation. And these responses are largely driven by predation risk perception. So I think birds have a similar response, and they prefer having the company of other species when they're out foraging in our encroached savanna systems. It is important to understand these interactions, species-species interactions, because they have evolutionary consequences for many wildlife communities. So I conducted this study in the savanna ecosystem of Eswatini. Elephants were extirpated in this ecosystem around 70 years ago, and bush encroachment is predicted to intensify. I use bird data collected by my collaborators in 1998 and 2008 in 4 different parks. The different colors indicate national or private parks, but all have similar bush cover. I did another bird survey in 2020 so that I can look at community changes within a 22-year period. Each of the 4 sites had 12 plots. The 4 surveys were done in a total of 40 plots, in a total of 48 plots. I use satellite data to characterize vegetation cover for 1998, 2008, and 2020. The goal was to understand bush cover change and how that related to changes in bird communities. In this analysis, I also classified tree and grass cover because these cover types have been shown to impact bird communities in the region. The red circles are the 12 plots in one of the sites, and I quantified cover in each of these plots. So these are some of the results I have so far. So I'm still working on this. I'm not done. So this is just some preliminary results that I'm sharing with you. So far, what we see is that vegetation, maybe let's just start with, let me orient you to graph a little bit. So the gray bars show changes in 1998, yellow bars 2008, and green bars 2020. The vertical axis shows percentages, and horizontal axis are the tree cover types. Today, we're focusing on bush cover effects. And as you can see, there was a rapid increase in bush cover between 1998 and 2008. And in 2020, this has not changed much. So what are the impacts on species richness? So in total, our bird community was made up of a total of 126 species. And looking at the graph on the vertical axis, there's estimate species richness per plot, while on the horizontal axis, we have the different periods. And as you can see, there is a downward trend in species richness from 1998 to 2020. So what's going on here? Well, what's going on is the extinction rate is higher in 2020 compared to the other year. This graph depicts exactly that. So on the vertical axis is the estimate for extinction rate, and the horizontal axis shows change in shrub cover from 2020 to 1998. This means that when shrub cover was low in 1998, there were less species going extinct at the plot versus in 2020. And looking at colonization, which is the increase of species in our plots, was also lower in 2020 versus 2008 and 1998. So in short, with increase in bush cover, less species are likely to settle in our system. So species traits are related to ecosystem functions, and the loss in trait create less resilient ecosystem. So the question is, does bush encroachment impact species traits? To answer this question, I focus on two important traits, which is diet and nesting. Diet is important when we consider the role of species in, for example, reducing insects that may be pests, or if we're considering the function of seed dispersal. So first, I want to draw your attention to the legend on the right, which shows 4 different diet groups. Then on the vertical axis, you can see 3 estimates of diet changes. So looking from the bottom, labeled initial occupancy. So that is how things look like in 1998. So in terms of these different food groups. And we can see that in general, there was a low occupancy. So when you went out to do surveys, you were not likely to find a lot of these diets in the plots. And moving on to local colonization, this plot shows that there was low colonization of all groups in general. So local colonization and extinction, those are changes that are happening from 1998 to 2020. So what is happening is that all these groups are coming to the system at a very low rate. But what is happening, what seems to be happening is that there's some evidence for an increase in extinction, even though most of these measures are not really significant. And moving on to nesting traits. The nesting trait is important because if we're thinking about reproduction in birds, it is important that birds find nesting substrate. And again, as you can see, in 1998, things like grass nesters and cavity nesters were also shrub nesters were really low in the system in 1998. Moving on, colonization rate was also low for cavity and grass nesters in the system. Extinction rate seems to be higher for shrub and tree nesters. Those are interesting patterns. So, but what happens when the ecosystem really changes. We expect changes in behavior as well. And I'm still working on this. So we are based on other studies, for example, in the northeast systems of the US, we know that species like chickadees and titmouse, they are important. They're important for other species. So other species tend to join the species when they're out foraging, because chickadees and titmouse, they produce alarm calls that our birds can use to detect predators, but they also attack predators. So the question here is, are we observing the same phenomenon in this woody encroach system? And what does that mean for the community? If there are specific species that we can target for conservation, for example, if there is like maybe 2, 3, 4 species that are important in flock formation and maintenance, can we focus on those species for conservation in the system? So I'm still working on this, still have the raw data. With that, thank you so much. And I thank these individuals. The first one is my advisor. The next 2 are my committee members. And the last one is a collaborator. I thank all these organizations, institutions, and all these parks down here. Thank you so much, all.
Muzi, thank you so much. All this work you're doing and all the analysis, it's so fascinating. So thank you so much. So now is the time, if there is anyone in the audience who has questions for Muzi, now is your time. You're welcome to type them in the Q&A. And Muzi, I have 2 questions for you right off the bat. Number 1, what is your favorite bird?
Oh, it's easy. The fork-tailed drongo.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a small black bird. I think some people may know it as an important Savanna mimic. So, for example, there are studies on meerkats where the drongo would just sit there and mimic the meerkat alarm call. So when a meerkat finds food, the drongo will just give this warning call such that meerkats run away, the drongo goes down, steal the food. So it's just a smart bird.
That is a very clever bird. I like the strategy. That's awesome. And my second question is, you're doing a lot of field work, right? In the summers, you were saying. So what is the most challenging part for you for actually doing the field work?
I think that the most challenging thing for me is just getting there. So from here, getting there. So I've been going every summer. It's getting expensive. Yeah, so I think that's the most challenging. Otherwise, when I get there, everything's fine.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I don't see any questions coming in. I think you wowed them with all your information. So again, Muzi, thank you so much for sharing all of your hard work. And I think you had told me in conversation that you have about 1 year left in your doctorate program.
I do. So I better get working on this data.
Then I'll have to call you Dr. Sibiya.
Yeah.
And again, thank you so much, Muzi, again, for your time. And thank you to our wonderful audience for joining us. We really appreciate it. I always like to close our webinars with just sharing some information about what we have going on at Hawk Mountain now, and we hope you're able to join us there sometime soon. It's beautiful fall migration. I also want to let everyone know that thanks to generous donors, Hawk Mountain has an IDEA scholarship fund. And by IDEA, we mean inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. So that fund is there to remove any potential barriers for individuals and or organizations to experience Hawk Mountain either on site or off site or any education programs. So definitely contact our education team if you're interested in that. So other things we have going on at Hawk Mountain, well, it's fall migration. So come on out, it's amazing. And every weekend during the fall up through Thanksgiving, we have lots of free programs, including programs with live raptors on the weekends. This weekend, we have a Wild Women on the Mountain overnight camping experience. That will be amazing. We also have an autumn lecture this Saturday evening with Todd Bauman, our stewardship director. Next week on the 19th, we have Homeschool Happenings Falcon Fest. On October 22nd, we have Celebrating Members sale in our bookstore. Also on the 22nd, we have an accessible hawk watch at South Lookout from 2 to 4. Also on the 22nd, we have Autumn Lecture, Critical Insight into the Lives and Ecology of Scavenging Birds of Prey. And that's with Dr. Keith Bildstein. On the 23rd, we have Native Habitat Garden Birding Challenge. On the 26th, Hawk Watching with the President. And one of my personal favorites, Halloween on the 29th. It's a family-friendly event, costume contest, and you are guaranteed to see some owls. And then on the 30th, we have Yoga on the Mountain. So thank you everyone again so much. Muzi, thank you again. And we hope to see you on the mountain soon.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thank you, everyone.
Bye for now.
Bye.